Let's talk about Asia. It's,
Mm.
what is it, March 20th?
Yeah.
Is it too soon to be looking at demand from Asia?
So Asia is a really interesting case in point, and we have at Digital Hotelier a number of clients who are either based in Asia or quite heavily on demand from the Asian markets. Now, what we have seen is that, firstly, in the Western world in particular, people tend to generalize about parts of the world. So they refer to Europe or Asia or America as if they're kind of all the same. And certainly what we've observed in Asian markets is that it's quite a different situation on the ground in different countries, which probably sounds logical, but people often jump to assumptions. So obviously the virus started out, unfortunately, in China, but it was one part of China. Of course, China is a huge market. South Korea was very badly hit, and South Korea and China were two of the fastest growing outbound markets for a number of our guests until recently, number of our clients rather until recently. But what we are starting to see is that in a number of Asian markets, the number of new infections is either flattening out, declining, or indeed stopping. China had their first day with no new cases yesterday. And we're also seeing, we're tracking on Baidu, we're tracking on Google, looking at the searches which are taking place in those markets, Naver in South Korea, the searches for international travel, searches for hotels in overseas capital cities, they're picking up and they're rebounding. And in the Chinese domestic market, travel is actually, hotel bookings are starting to recover. Now, the big barrier to international travel for Asian markets at the moment is really the travel restrictions. A lot of countries, people from those, quite a number of Asian markets will not be allowed into the country. If they are allowed in the country, even when they go back home again, they may be having to go into 14-day quarantine periods. So it's a tough period, and it's not going to rebound straight away from the large Asian markets because travel restrictions are in place. But our advice to people is this, that it's kind of logical that the countries that were first affected by the virus are the most likely to come out of the other side first. And that is something which we're seeing in a number of Asian markets. And Hong Kong have done a great job in terms of containing a number of cases by acting early. Taiwan doesn't actually have a huge number of cases relative to the size of the population. Korea, it's starting to flatten out. China, it's not growing. So those markets are likely to rebound before markets in Europe, which were hit a little bit later. So when you're thinking about your forward planning, it's a good idea to look at some of the historical data that you have on those markets. What was happening before this virus hit? And then start looking at your targeting, and then start planning in terms of, okay, as soon as these travel restrictions do lift, which of these Asian markets might I target? How am I going to target them? And what am I going to offer to these markets to attract them to come to my hotel? Because from our perspective, we've seen that trend of growing outbound travel from a number of Asian markets, particularly China, for quite a few years now. This is likely to be a pause rather than a long-term scenario. So we're really encouraging people to keep an eye on those Asian markets so that when they do recover, this is probably an area of source travelers, which is really worth focusing on in the future to help you recover from the situation that you're in right now.